Hello,
Hello,
how are you
Nick.
doing?
Oh,
Great to
we're
see
doing
you.
good. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Of
So,
course.
before we begin, I actually have a quick intro video to show you all. In the quiet vastness of the Atlantic, giants roam the seas in vast numbers. North Atlantic right whales, the mariners of our oceans. Their calls are like music nestled in the deep blue. However, their symphony has reduced to a number fewer than a chorus of voices in a small room. Entangled, stuck, unheard for the sake of human greed. Their survival story isn't just about extinction, it's about us, our choices, our silence, and urgency. But amidst the noise of industry and indifference, a new voice rises. Meet Nick Williams, a naturalist, innovator, and founder of a startup that dares to imagine a future where technology protects instead of threatens, where whales are not just data points, but sentinels of a healthier ocean. Welcome, everyone, to another Echoes of the Wild webinar. Today, we're zooming in with Nick Williams, a naturalist from Amelia Island, who's currently organizing a foundation to protect the critically endangered North Atlantic right whale. Please give him a round of applause.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very excited to be talking with you guys today. And
Mm-hmm.
figured I'd go with the tropic theme since we're doing some ocean. So,
Yeah. All right. So tell us about what motivated you to protect these whales.
well, it's actually a really interesting thing. So I grew up. So my hero growing up was Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter. And when I was in elementary school, I sent my little flat Stanley to him. I got a huge reward back that motivated me to teach people about wildlife. And growing up in Jacksonville, I didn't really know anything about our wildlife until much later in my life. And then I learned one day that we have one of the rarest, most special animals in the world in my own backyard. And that's something I couldn't let go extinct. It's just an incredible fact that most people that live in our city and the Duval County area, they have no idea that these animals exist. And it's a very, very strange thing to think about. This would be like living in Africa and not knowing about white rhinos or knowing about elephants. So these are, again, one of the most special animals ever. As the more I learn about them, the more I find out how important they are to our environment. So one of my favorite little facts. You mentioned that work at the Ritz as well as a naturalist, and that's where we met. And one of my favorite things to tell kids is a little. It's a gross simplification of the actual fact, but it's a fun one. So whales, and not just the right whale, but all whales, are very important for nutrient cycling. They feed deep, they defecate on the surface of the water or poop, and that poop fuels phytoplankton growth. Well, 80% of oxygen comes from that diatom on Earth. And it's so what my little simplification for the kids is that the whale is the opposite of a dragon. A dragon's a fake animal that flies and breathes out CO2 fire. Well, a whale's a real giant that swims and poops out oxygen. And we need that oxygen a lot right now. So these guys are animals that really, really help us out when it comes down to our climate crisis. They do a lot of carbon sequester. One whale, one right whale specifically, can sequester 3,300 tons of carbon dioxide in its lifetime, which is insane. This is more than most forest in Florida, most forest on Earth, actually. I think the Amazon will sequester a little bit more than that, but most forests are under what a single whale can do, which is literally insane to think about because we don't tend to think about these animals that way as animals that help us. They're also animals that are very, very majestic. I'm a shore spotter for Marineland. So I have my own nonprofit. I also participate in Marineland's Right Whale Project, which is a separate nonprofit, and I got to witness a mother and her calf playing last year. One of the most fascinating things I've ever seen in my life. I've seen them jump. I saw them do a little backstroke. So it was a really, really fun time. Being able to witness this is something that I want for my children and their grandchildren. And it's something that could really, really help out this area in when it comes economically as well due to tourism and other factors. So thank you so much for that question, and hope I answered
Yeah, I
it.
mean, right whales are extremely important to the ecosystem, and it's just truly amazing that these animals live in our very own backyards, and during the season we can have an opportunity to actually see some of the world's most rare animals. All right, and here's another question. For those of for those of our viewers who don't exactly know what these animals are. Like, could you tell us a little bit more about the North Atlantic right whales?
Oh, absolutely. So North Atlantic right whales are very different than your typical baleen whale. So most people know toothed whale and baleen whale, toothed whales being dolphins, sperm whales, belugas, the ones you typically see in aquarium. Baleen whales being the ones that have the big hairs, almost like a paintbrush for a mouth. Well, when you think of a baleen whale, most people think of a humpback whale or a blue whale or a fin whale, the whales that kind of lunge up from under the water and grab, expanding their throats very wide, circumferencing a whole bunch of different food. Well, right whales are not that, not anywhere close. So right whales are in the family Eubalinia. There's three species of right whale: North Atlantic, North Pacific, and Southern. Out of those three, the Southern's the only one that's not critically endangered. But we also have the bowhead whale, which is another whale that a lot of people forget about as well in the Eubalinia family. And what separates them from rorquals is the lack of throat groove and their behavior. So Eubalinias are rather slow animals. They swim near the surface and they very slowly sift their food, while a rorqual comes out from under and moves fast. A right whale is average pace is about 6 miles per hour, where the average pace of a humpback would be about 15. Well, 15 is right whale's top speed, so his sprint is humpback whale's walk, so to speak. So humpbacks and blue whales can hit 37 miles per hour. They're a lot faster. They tend to live deeper out in the ocean, which is why they don't run into the problems that our right whales run into. And they are a lot more generalist. One of my favorite things about the North Atlantic right whale. So a lot of people know that whales eat plankton. People that know a little bit more about whales know that they're carnivores and that they can only eat the krill. But most people don't know that the North Atlantic right whale can actually only eat one species of krill on the planet. So I don't know the Latin name of it. There's only one tiny species of shrimp that this animal can actually digest. So when it comes to the other species of shrimp, they're not food for the whale either, which is one of the reasons why, even though in Jacksonville we have our Mayport shrimp, we have a lot of different varieties. The right whale's actually fast when they're down here, just like in most whales besides the blue. And they're very specialist feeders comparatively. Now, their biology allows them to do a lot of really cool things. Now, they are also very heavy. So a common number that you'll see is when you go online, it will say the fin whale is the second largest whale. That usually refers to length. Right whales average about the same size as the heaviest fin whales. A male right whale can be between 70 and 80 tons, while a female is between 50 and 40 tons. Typically, it would be like the larger case of fin whale to reach 70, but the largest right whales on record are in the hundreds of tons. These are exceptional individuals. This is nowhere near the common, but there's right whales that have weighed up to 117, 116 ton, which makes them rank as the second heaviest animal alive today. So they are giants in their own right. They tend to be a little bit more trusting of people than they should be. They end up in the shipping lanes. Vessel impact is one of the biggest things that kind of harms the right whales. So they do some really, really cool stuff that I'd probably get into a little bit with later questioning when it comes to the sound tracking, but that is a very big deal. But we do have a few legal things that have helped our right whales out a lot. So right now, there is a push to create a marine speed limit of 10 miles per hour, because smaller boats tend to be what causes right whale collisions these days. And a smaller boat going around 10 is a lot less dangerous than a fast one. They have the passive acoustic, which redirects any boat bigger than 65 feet. We have shore spotters and aerial spotters on top of that. So in areas where we don't have a sound tracking system, shore spotters like myself are soon to be aerial spotter as well, but are able to point out the right whales, point their location to the right whale tracking network, and then we can tell large shipping vessels where they are. One more little bonus fun fact before I stop my little right whale rant is one of my favorite things that just highlights the intelligence of these guys. So within the North Atlantic right whale population during the summer grounds, which is where they are right now, you have half of them in Nantucket, just around the coast of Cape Cod, and then you have half of them up in the Bay of Fundy, which is near Nova Scotia. Well, a fun thing a lot of people don't know about outside the bioacoustic or sound community, I'm not sure if I mentioned I'm a sound scientist. The right whales actually have two dialects, even in the small population. Canadian right whales have a different vocalization pattern than Massachusetts right whales. And so when it comes to that, you see regional variation. You can also see regional variation of behavior similar to dolphins, where they have their own unique behavioral patterns. So I mentioned very early on that right whales only eat one species of krill. Well, 2 years ago, that krill had a decline. It had a hard season. It's since recovered. But right whales showed their adaptivity. These animals started swimming in V formation, echelon formation, which is what birds swim in. And they started feeding more efficiently. They would literally shovel krill into each other's mouth to get the maximum catch that they could. So we can see them being clever, we can see them planning, and we can see the intelligence that you see in some of the more studied whales like humpbacks as well.
That's amazing. So
Mm.
here's another question. What are some ongoing threats that the right whales face? Because like even in some areas, they're unintentionally harmed. Like
Mhm.
for example, in Maine, lobster fisheries, which are trying to catch lobsters, especially with like the rope mechanisms, the whales accidentally get caught in them as well. What other threats do they face along with that?
So what you hit was the biggest nail on the head. That's their current biggest threat. If you look at NOAA data, they have been killed by ropes more often than they're killed by vessels these days. The other one is still vessel strikes. It's been mitigated, but it's not gone. We have that sound system, which is able to get the bigger vessels away from them, but they're still smaller vessels. So when you report a right whale sighting, you tend to wait a week before you make it noticeable to the public because everybody wants to go on a little whale watch and they might accidentally collide with the animal. So we always make sure smaller boats actually don't know where they are while larger boats do. And that seems counterproductive, but sometimes you just got to make the crowd a little bit smaller. And when it comes down to these smaller boats, so one thing that can help one is soft boats, zodiacs, especially jet zodiacs. A jet zodiac has no way of harming a whale. It's too light and it has no motor. Kayaks as well. Kayaks are fairly safe for the whale, not necessarily for you, but it's safe for the whale. They are able to really just it is almost 100% ropes and boats. They next biggest threat would be the famine. So conditions for the shrimp that they eat in the areas around Nantucket and Bay of Fundy. So those shrimp have been found in odd places. They've actually had to relocate slightly from their typical feeding grounds within the past 3 years because of the climate conditions and warming. So the shrimp that they eat are slightly different location than they would be the previous year. So that's another thing that they've been finding out is a problem for the right whales. But international trade is actually a big one. So one thing you can do is shop locally, shop for people that produce things in the States or in your local area, not even necessarily in the US, but in your local state. And that keeps things from being shipped maritime, and maritime shipping is one of the problems that they face, honestly. But that gets me into the solutions, which is what I love and what I'm hoping to work towards. So at WhaleGuard, I'm also in close association with a few other nonprofits. I'm associated with Marineland and Blue Water Research slightly as well. Have been peer reviewed by the executive biologist at Blue Water for my study and what I'm trying to do. And one really cool thing that the sound tracking system offers that we haven't really exploited yet is location. So when an animal makes a sound, it produces a wave, just like ocean wave. And the top and the bottom of the wave are called amplitude in sound physics. So amplitude is just peak to trough. If you were a surfer, it would be how tall your wave is. Well, how tall your wave is how far your wave can go. Most people don't know that one. Amplitude equals distance. And if you know the exact location due to amplitude triangulation, so you would make a listening grid in the shape of a triangle, find the distance between all three recorders, and then you have the location of the whale. Well, if we understand their calls a little bit better, we can know exactly when this whale gets hurt because if we knew the distress call, which is what I'm working toward, we can figure out where and when this happened. And rescue is a very good thing, but it's not as dependable as it should be. If we can actually get our response to where it is almost immediate, then these right whales would survive a lot more. So most of them have been rescued, by the way. About 80% of right whales have faced entanglement in their lives, and they will get cut free by people like Jameson at Blue Water or further north. I don't actually know who does that further north, but New England has their own disentanglement teams as well. But when it comes down to these problems that they face, response is everything. A right whale can survive 6 months entangled. It becomes emaciated, becomes very, very damaged. The ropes will dig into them. So it is a very, very big deal. Now, 3 months is enough to make a female miscarry due to the energy expenditure of her dragging the rope with her. Sometimes they can break it, sometimes they can't, but most of the time they have to be rescued. And if we could figure out what help means, if we could figure out what ouch means, we could make that rescue 3 days rather than 3 months. And that's the biggest deal. So our current method, which I do hope to increase as well by increasing a citizen science program to get more people in the sky, that is only a band-aid. If the real fix is being able to increase that response time dramatically.
Yeah, I mean, we really need to act fast. And if we can just put our minds to it and use innovative strategies, then we can easily save these whales from the brink of extinction. And that brings me to my
Absolutely.
next question. So tell me a little bit more about like your partnerships with airlines and like how do you think it can cause a positive impact?
So my partnership is currently still being negotiated. I'm waiting for my partner to sign a contract, but as far as just footwork, it's all in place. So I partnered with a local flight company on Amelia Island called Ascent Aviation Inc. There's also a branch in Jacksonville, but I'm specifically partnered with the Amelia Island one. And what this does is this allows more eyes in the sky. So currently, aerial spotting is done by FWC. Well, as you guys probably know from interviewing other researchers, funding for traditional biology is difficult at best. You have a lot of government grants, especially if you're a state owned. You have a lot less ability to target donors. You're basically being funded by grant and whatever political things are going on. So FWC can only afford so many flights and so many people in the sky. But if you open this up to tours, then the guests themselves are paying for it and sponsoring it. So each tour pays for the flight itself as well as a small donation to help with other whale science. It allows the guests to actually get involved and hear the story that you're sharing right now, because one of the things that the right whale needs more than anything is recognition. Most people in America, pretty much outside of Amelia Island and Boston, I've never met anybody who knows who a right whale is. So I work with tourists all the time, and mainly just people in Massachusetts and Amelia Island are the people who know of them. So the awareness is very low. By getting people to take part to actually help rescue the whale by photographing it, sharing its location, and just becoming a whale hero yourself, that is the best way that anybody can learn the process, is to do it. And what I am a huge proponent of citizen science. I have a citizen science project for another thing with the RITS involving dolphins. But by being a active member of the biological community, you get to see what these animals are facing firsthand. You're no longer behind the screen of a TV. You're there and you're in the trenches, and you get to have the fun, you get to have the adventure, the excitement of a true biologist. And that's one thing I hope to share, as well as just the passion involved in that, getting to know these animals firsthand, sharing their stories on a tour. And then there's always the chance that you get to see one from the sky, which is something that 90% of human beings aren't going to be able to do. So
That's amazing to hear. And here's another question. How do you think that aerial photography of these right whales and ecotourism could create a positive impact on their conservation? And do you think it's possible that at some point this could become like very beneficial and possibly a hotspot for ecotourism?
I 120% do. I think that Jacksonville and Amelia Island specifically have a huge goal. This is a lot of people don't realize just what we have around this Cumberland Sound area. We have these beautiful right whales. We have a dolphin culture that only happens here, where dolphins come on land to feed, called strand feeding. We have wild horses. In Gainesville, you even have bison. So there's a lot of wildlife that you could possibly see out here. But the North Atlantic right whales, we are their primary capping ground. Half the population is here every year and will continue to be here every year as long as they're there. If we can get their population up, we could have numbers like Australia. I mean, the southern right whale was once 400, very close to population of the North Atlantic. Now it's 20,000. So with the right conservation in place, we can increase these animals' ability to live. Another little thing that gives me positive hope that these animals will increase is that their lifespan is probably longer than what we know. So the southern right whale used to also be estimated with a lifespan about 80 years. But as we let them live longer, as we got better protection, we now know they live 150 years. The North Atlantic is actually slightly closer related to the bowhead whale than the southern right whale is, which is only good news, because the average lifespan of a bowhead whale is 273 years. So these animals might be able to live a lot longer than they do, reproduce more, and the older they get, the more populous they get as well. So these animals don't lose their ability to breed until they're well over 100. So these animals can have multiple calves going on season through season if we're able to get that back. Now, how the planes can help directly. So first of all, economic incentive. The more money this makes for the city, for the government, the more protections they get. That's hands down. The more willing lawmakers are to cooperate. The other thing is that just by tracking them with that location, so not only are we photographing the whale from the air, but I'm taking its GPS location from the plane, and I'm reporting that directly to the people who track them. So those large shipping vessels like a Carnival cruise or a a freight loader would be redirected and be forced to reroute 500 yards from where the whale is at all times. So that's basically the southern version of the passive acoustic. Now, we will eventually get a passive acoustic network. University of Georgia is at work on that. But in the south, we are currently only visual right now, which is makes it a little bit more difficult for us down here. But they are they have that aerial sighting is a huge deal for them. The other thing that it helps us do is track the numbers. So I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but every right whale is photo ID'd that we know of. We have right whales are very easy to recognize. They have their own unique patterns called callicities. Those resemble kind of beards or facial hair pattern for an extent. And my favorite one, Calvin, has a goatee. So if you ever see a whale with a goatee, his name's Calvin. Tell him hi for me. But the patterns are extremely easy to recognize. So you can go on whales.org if you ever see a right whale and you can see exactly who you saw. Now that's cool for tourism, but it's also cool for the fact that we know every individual. And if we keep track of that, we could even, with responsible numbers, you can have a photo ID log of well over 20K. So we could, even when their population increases, we could keep these animals personal, keep these animals to a point where we know them intimately. And that helps a lot when it comes to population genetics, population tracker, because one thing these animals are going to inevitably face is a genetic bottleneck. For those who don't know what that is, it means that closely related animals lose genetic diversity just due to a drop in population, and that makes them more vulnerable to disease. And that's another possible solution. It would be a genetic one involving a company like Colossal that is able to kind of work with the cloning process and bring back dead individuals to repopulate. They're doing actually very interesting project with red wolves right now, where red wolves are also an animal that's down to 100 population. They're cloning red wolves that were killed in the 1800s to allow them to breed with current populations to reboot genetic diversity. So that is a way down the line possibility for the right whales as well. But yeah, I'm very hopeful that they will come back. I actually have zero doubt in my mind for the North Atlantic right whale. A little nervous about the North Pacific. I'm not going to sugarcoat that one. But with the North Atlantic, I think they can recover pretty easily.
Speaking of the North Pacifics, is it possible for them, like, we could use this method on them also? We can use passive
Definitely.
acoustics and aerial photography so they can gain as
100%.
much recognition as other whales as well?
Yes, sir. So same technology would work. Would have to do the study again though, because difference in vocalization pattern. So southern right whales, North Atlantic right whales have different vocalization patterns as well as just differences between population. Now, I after our last conversation, I did try to look into the population numbers, and the Asian North Pacific right whales couldn't find any. The North Pacific right whales in North America are recognized somewhere between estimations range from about 70 to 30 individuals right now. So there are multiple populations. Unlike the North Atlantic, they're not endemic to the North American continent right now. So there is more hope for them. But I also have hope for them because of a story of the North Atlantic right whale. So in 1860, the North Atlantic right whale was thought to be extinct. It was thought to be gone. It wasn't rediscovered until 1947. So we could just be missing where they are. The ocean's a big place, and there could be a population that we don't know about. And that even includes the North Atlantics, because we know about our calving ground in Jacksonville, about Amelia Island to St. Augustine. But what we don't know about is where half of the population goes when they're not breeding. So they don't stay in New England during the winter. There's another area where right whales congregate that's just unknown to us. So that could be a calving ground. It could not be a calving ground, but there's still some mystery with these guys a little bit as well that gives us hope and a little bit of wiggle room, hopefully.
Yeah, hope is an important thing for these whales, and that's the thing that keeps conservation efforts running. And here's a question about passive acoustics. So,
Mhm.
how do these passive acoustics help us track some whales, and how can their vocalizations help us find them in the vast
So
ocean?
simple. Oh, sorry. Uh, so it is a simple physics, basically. So when you have a sound or a wave, so let's go back to the ocean again. So when you're surfing on a wave, a wave is actually in mathematics called a sine function. So you are able to use trigonometry to kind of simplify it into a line, and then you're able to use that to calculate the distance from it. Now with physical waves, it's pretty easy. They're both measured in meters between amplitude and distance. But with sound, you have to convert decibels into meters. So it's pretty much just math. You have listening stations in the form of a triangle, the same way that a GPS works by having 3 satellites to pinpoint something. The passive acoustic network has 3 listening stations, and that pinpoints the whale in the center of it. Now, one thing that I am also doing for my project, so I'm going to put a heart rate monitor and make a smaller passive acoustic around it with drones. I'm also going to use GPS distance to kind of get a margin of error between actual travel distance and the mathematically calculated distance. So basically you can consider this as an accuracy ratio so that you can kind of check that a little bit tighter. Most passive acoustic networks are accurate to about a mile. When you small them down, you need a GPS to compare with, but they are very, very efficient at finding, and most whales are actually found off the coast using them in New England rather than other sources. And passive acoustics, I believe, is the future because as a bioacoustic scientist, I specialize in classifying new calls. Now, you can actually use new calls to know meaning, and some calls travel farther than others. So the farthest a right whale can be tracked from is well over 20 miles. So a right whale's up call, for example, can travel. Now, this isn't a formally logged number. This is from multiple papers that dispute each other, but the largest distance I've read is 200 miles that a right whale can be heard from. So anywhere from 20 to 200 miles, a right whale can be tracked based on its up call. So this gives us a wide range, a lot more efficiently than, say, a visual tracker. If you had to skim 200 miles of water, you're a lot less likely to find it than if you're just listening to it, pinpoint that sound, and get triangulated to the animal. So it just simplifies things. Whales communicate a lot. As a matter of fact, right whales actually stay in touch when they're vast distances. Right whales have been recorded kind of co-sinking a dive from 100 miles away at one point. This is called acoustic herding. It happens with a lot of big baleen whales because we tend to see baleen whales as solitary, but they're actually kind of in touch just because their calls travel so far. And their calls are in the infrasound range, which is extremely low range, usually too low for humans to hear without special recording equipment as well. So a lot of the whale calls that you hear are actually edited to make it into your hearing range. But these infrasounds can travel a lot farther than our voice and sound in the normal range.
That's amazing to hear. It's so fascinating how passive acoustics can help us track whales and be able to find them. So, with that, thank you so much for this insightful conversation. And now, for anyone who has any questions, please do feel free to ask.
I need to open the chat thing.
Yeah, I can, if I may ask, Nick, thank you so much. This is really enlightening. Just wanted to ask you, like, I know you mentioned colossal bio, and, I know there's a lot of interesting work around de-extinction and a lot of ethical controversies. But in terms of, obviously the right whales are still here with us, thankfully, and hopefully they'll be with us for a long time. But are there like any methods or things that we could potentially do, like to increase genetic diversity with, not really going to the extent of actually like getting like, let's say, megalodons back, but there's probably some middle ground, right? Like maybe genetic diversity artificially being introduced.
Yes, sir. So there's a lot of middle ground actually. So when it comes to colossal, I literally couldn't care less about the dire wolf. That's not what interests me with them. It's the red wolf. So when we have a low population, and I'm going to kind of go on a tangent, and I promise I'll hit your question. But one of the stories I like to tell when I'm being a naturalist at my other job and when I'm giving educational talks is the story of banana Laffy Taffy. So a lot of people don't know why banana candy doesn't taste like a banana. But the thing is the artificial flavor was taken off a banana that nobody eats anymore. It's called the Gros Michel or the Big Mike. Now, the Big Mike is a clone of itself. It's every Big Mike is a clone, full genetic diversity. So one disease could wipe out the whole crop. So that always is a threat that we got to think about. And funny enough, that could happen to our current banana too, because they did the same thing. But One really cool thing about being able to bring animals from the past, not necessarily extinct animals, but let's say we have a red wolf from the 1800s. Well, his DNA could have been lost to time, but you're able to clone him back, and now you have an exact genetic replica of that animal, and it is able to reproduce normally. So that lost genome is now back into the population genetics. And we see a genetic bottlenecking affecting a lot of animals differently. So in marine biology, a good example of that is the elephant seal. So the northern elephant seal and the southern elephant seal actually at one point were the same species, but whalers killed most of the ones in the north, so they became genetically bottlenecked, and they actually have made genetic differences that made them a subspecies within about 200 years. So some of these changes that you see, some of these immune problems that you see are very recent. So if we take back ancestors, we can actually bring them back using currently living whales because they are the same species. It's a lot easier to clone from an animal that is not extinct. So with the dire wolves, for example, that Colossal's doing, they have to take the DNA of a dire wolf, which is incomplete, clone it into a gray wolf, and then eventually breed the gray wolf out of it. So it's going to take about a lot of generations to do that. But for endangered animal, it's a lot more simple because we have the animal present, we have the DNA there. Now with right whales, we have a huge advantage if somebody were to try this, because we have a lot of museums loaded with whaling specimens, the ones that were killed in the 1800s, the original population of these guys. And these are when we get the DNA from the giants, so the 117 ton, the 115 ton animals. So we have access to that. We have a lot in the Smithsonian alone, but there's museums throughout the world that have North Atlantic right whale that they could clone. The big deal that we would have to be careful of is make sure that it is a North Atlantic and not a Southern or a North Pacific if you are doing cloning, so to avoid hybridization. And you would have to really take a genetic expert to do that. So that is something that I would not do yet with my nonprofit, because I think the habitat of the North Atlantic right whale has to be more secure for the animal before we have a giant population, but it is definitely a possibility. Did I answer your question?
Sorry, I think we probably lost him, but we have one more question from another.
Yeah, we
Of
have
course.
a question. So someone asked, what kind of support do governments or other organizations provide for your team's effort?
So for me, I don't do government. I'm trying to be a donor base. I'm courting corporate sponsorships right now. I have some exciting opportunities when it comes to certain companies that I hope to work with, just for awareness reasons as well as getting donations from them. But when it comes to a nonprofit, the most stable way to run a nonprofit is donors. Donors are everything. So when you have donors, you have flexibility. When it comes to governments, a lot of times you have to get grants. Now, grants, you have to do what they want rather than what you want. So you have to figure out a way to convince the grant donor that you are doing what their grants for. And a lot of these are very, very specific. So grants are hard to get, and you can't usually get the same grant twice. So it's a lot more difficult of a road to be grant funded than it is to be donor funded. So that's just the basis of nonprofits. So with some government assistance, like Georgia would be willing to probably chip in if I went that route, because their state animal is the North Atlantic right whale. But you have to figure out a cause that would convince the government entity to help. So with Jacksonville, we mentioned that right whales could bring in tourism dollars. That would be something that would allow them to maybe sponsor somebody like myself or Blue Water. But it is different with each local government. You're more likely to get funding from the local level than you are from the federal or state level. But if you do stuff and you can show that you can do stuff, it's not out of the question. The other thing is, right now I'm a startup, and when you have to kind of be established really to get government funding. You have to have been doing this for a long time, and you have to be able to show that your research is actually producing, because they are very strict about grants and grant rights. So it's a very difficult process to do a nonprofit startup, but as an independent biologist, it's the only way. They won't give you grants or anything if you're just a contractor biologist.
All right. Do we have any more questions?
No, I think we're good.
Yeah, I think we're good. All right.
Yeah, but I
As our
just wanted
seminar
to.
comes to a close. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say thank you. I've learned so much about right whales.
Thank you so much, Ramya. I enjoyed talking to all of you guys. Believe me, this is a huge pleasure to be able to do this.
Yeah, and any way we can contribute to this, we would be happy to contribute and learn more.
Thank you. Yeah, so I do have a website, WhaleGuard Bioacoustic, or sorry, not Bioacoustics, that's my company name. WhaleGuardResearch.org is the website. And
Okay.
I do want to make sure that everybody on here puts in research because there is another crypto company that goes by WhaleGuard. I didn't know about them when I got my name and everything. So WhaleGuardResearch.org is me. Regular WhaleGuard.org is a cryptocurrency site that you probably want to avoid.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much, Nick, for being with us as today. So, guys, as our seminar comes to a close, I hope you all have learned some very insightful information about right whales and their critical conservation for the health of our world's oceans. Our oceans play a vital part to our world's ecosystems, and right whales, no matter how small they are, still play an important role in the conservation and ecological balance of our world's oceans. So once again, thank you so much, Nick, for being with us today. And always remember, be curious, stay wild, and we'll see you on the next Echoes of the Wild adventure. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody. And thank you so much for what you do for conservation, seriously.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us, and it's greatly important for the balance of our oceans and our natural world.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.